The night had grown darker outside, the street lights casting long shadows that seemed to reach into the corners of Emma's living room. She sat on the couch, a blanket loosely draped around her shoulders, her wine glass resting on the coffee table. The room still smelled faintly of the takeout Chris had brought: sesame, garlic, and soy sauce mingling with the lingering scent of candle wax from the small candles she had lit earlier. Chris had stayed longer than she expected. At first, it was casual. Small talk, stories from their past, laughter over shared memories. But gradually the conversation had shifted. It had grown quieter, more intimate, charged with unspoken thoughts. And Emma had felt it: the pull, subtle but undeniable, a current running beneath every glance, every word. She had tried to push it away. He's Daniel's best friend, she had reminded herself countless times. You can't feel this way. You can't let this happen. But sitting across from him, watching the gentle way he listened, the way he leaned slightly closer without overstepping, she realized she couldn't ignore it. Chris cleared his throat softly, drawing her attention back. Emma, can I ask you something personal? Emma nodded, her throat suddenly dry. Of course. He hesitated, then said, do you ever feel alone, even when you're with someone? Her heart skipped a beat. The question was simple, but it pierced her like an arrow. She swallowed hard. Yes, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. More often than I care to admit. Chris leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. And there was no judgment there, only understanding. I thought so, he said softly. I see it in you. Even when you smile, there's something behind your eyes. A quiet longing, a part of you that feels unseen. Emma looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of the blanket. She had never spoken these thoughts aloud, not to Daniel, not to anyone. And yet, here he was, Chris, looking at her as if he understood her in a way no one else ever had. I don't know what to say, she murmured, the vulnerability in her voice surprising even her. You don't have to say anything, Chris replied gently. I just want you to know that it's okay to feel this way. That it's okay to be seen. The room was silent for a long moment, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of leaves outside. Emma felt her pulse quicken. She wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, to remind herself of Daniel and loyalty and boundaries. But the words wouldn't come. Her body betrayed her, leaning slightly forward. Drawn to the warmth and sincerity in his eyes, Chris shifted closer. Just a fraction. Enough that the air between them felt electric. Emma, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. You don't always have to be strong. You don't always have to carry everything by yourself. Let someone in, even if just for a little while. The words hit her harder than she expected. She felt a shiver run down her spine. Part of her wanted to lean into him, to feel the comfort and understanding he offered. Part of her screamed to stop, to remember who she was, what she had, the vows she had made. I can't, she whispered, the tremor in her voice betraying her resolve. I know, Chris said softly, his eyes reflecting a mixture of longing and pain. I know, and I would never ask you to betray him. But sometimes the heart doesn't listen to reason. Emma's breath caught. His words were dangerous, thrilling, and terrifying all at once. She felt as if the air in the room had thickened, charged with a tension she could no longer ignore. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the blanket around her. You shouldn't say things like that, she murmured, though even as she said it, a part of her felt relief, a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. Chris leaned back, running a hand through his hair. the movement slow and deliberate. "Maybe not," he admitted. "But I can't pretend I don't feel it. I can't pretend I don't see you. And I can't pretend that I haven't wanted to tell you this for years." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "For years?" she whispered, barely audible. He nodded, his expression raw and honest. "Since the first day I met you, I've always cared about you, more than I probably should have. But I never wanted to betray Daniel, and I never wanted to put you in a position where you had to choose." Her chest tightened. The weight of his words pressed on her like a tide, pulling her in every direction at once. She wanted to run, to escape, to remind herself of what was right. But another part of her, the part that had been lonely and unseen for so long longed to stay, to hear more, to feel the warmth of being understood. I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice shaking. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," Chris said, his voice gentle, grounding. "Just know that I'm here, that I see you, and that I've always cared." Emma's mind was a whirlwind. She thought of Daniel, his long hours at work, his distant demeanor, the way their conversations had grown routine and mechanical. She thought of the years they had spent together, the vows, the memories, the life they had built. And yet, she couldn't ignore the way her heart ached for something more, something real, something that made her feel alive again. Chris reached out, just a fraction, resting his hand near hers on the table. The gesture was small, tentative, but it sent a jolt through her that made her stomach flutter. She wanted to pull away, to maintain the boundaries that had always defined their relationship. But she didn't, not yet. The room seemed to shrink around them, the space between them charged with possibility. Emma's mind raced, torn between loyalty and desire, between the life she had and the life she wanted. She could feel the pull of something forbidden, something thrilling, and it terrified her. I can't," she whispered again, more firmly this time, though her body betrayed her. She leaned back slightly, creating a small distance, but her eyes remained locked on his. "I know," Chris said, his voice low, almost a sigh. "And I would never push you. But I had to tell you. I couldn't keep it in anymore. Not tonight." Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had never imagined that a simple visit from Chris could unravel so much inside her, stir feelings she had long buried, and make her question everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and desire. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them like a fragile thread. The only sounds were the faint ticking of the clock and the distant hum of traffic outside. Then Chris stood, reluctantly breaking the moment. "I should go," he said quietly, almost apologetically. "You need time to think. And I'll give you space. But remember, I care, Emma, more than you realize." Emma watched him gather his things, her heart heavy with a mix of longing and guilt. She wanted to reach out, to stop him, to ask him to stay, but the words wouldn't come. She felt as if she was suspended between two worlds, the life she had with Daniel, and the possibility of something she had never dared to imagine. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Emma alone in the dimly lit room. She sank onto the couch, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself, her mind racing. Every word, every glance, every small gesture from Chris lingered in her thoughts, echoing through her heart like a melody she couldn't forget. For the first time in years, Emma realized that life could change in a single evening. That a simple conversation, a look, a touch could awaken desires she had long suppressed. and force her to confront feelings she had buried beneath the routine of her marriage. And as she sat there, alone in the quiet house, she knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The soft clatter of plates on the counter filled the kitchen, mingling with the faint hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the night was calm. The streetlights cast golden rectangles across the living room floor, and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze punctuated the quiet. Emma and Chris sat across from each other at the small dining table, their takeout containers between them, the smell of sesame chicken and garlic noodles warming the kitchen. Emma had never realized how much she had missed the presence of someone who truly noticed her. The way Chris asked questions, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely cared, was something that stirred something deep inside her. "So, how's work been lately?" Chris asked, his voice easy, but his eyes held a weight that suggested he was listening for more than just the surface answer. Emma hesitated. She had been feeling invisible at the office, overlooked by her boss, undervalued despite her hard work. But she found herself opening up anyway. "It's fine, I guess. Busy. Lots of deadlines." Her words were careful, but Chris's look made her feel as if she could speak her truth. "And how's everything at home?" he asked gently, leaning forward slightly. The movement was subtle, but it made Emma's heart skip a beat. She sighed. Quiet. Too quiet. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. She took a sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread through her chest, calming and unsettling at the same time. Chris nodded, his eyes not leaving hers. "I know that feeling. Sometimes I wonder if people realize how much silence can weigh on someone." Emma blinked, surprised by how well he seemed to understand her. It wasn't sympathy. It was empathy. A kind that cut straight through pretense and routine. She remembered the days when Daniel had listened like this, when her words mattered to him in a way that made her feel alive. Those days felt distant now, buried beneath years of comfort and obligations that had dulled the edges of their love. "You always listen," she said softly, almost to herself. She realized she wasn't trying to compliment him, but simply acknowledging the truth she had been craving. Chris smiled faintly, a shadow of longing in his eyes. "I try. You deserve someone who really hears you, Emma. Someone who doesn't. Just wait for their turn to speak." The words hit her harder than she expected. She felt a shiver run down her spine. She looked down at her hands, twisting her wine glass as her mind raced. Daniel, Chris. What was happening in this quiet house? The conversation flowed on, easy yet intimate. Chris asked about her hobbies, her small joys, the little things she never mentioned to Daniel anymore. Emma found herself laughing, a soft, genuine laugh she hadn't felt in weeks. Each word, each smile, each glance made the air between them heavier, thicker, charged with something neither of them had named, but both felt at one point. Chris reached for the container of noodles and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed just briefly, but the touch lingered in her memory like a spark on dry grass. She swallowed hard, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. "You've changed," he said suddenly, his voice low and contemplative. "Not in a bad way, but I don't know. I guess I mean, you seem quieter than you used to be, more careful." Emma looked down, her eyes filling with a mix of emotion. "I've been tired," she admitted. "Tired of trying to hold everything together, tired of being invisible." She paused, the words catching in her throat. "Sometimes I wonder if Daniel even notices anymore." Chris's expression softened. "I notice." He didn't say it lightly. There was no teasing, no casual remark, just honesty, raw and steady. His words warmed her chest in a way that made her ache, but also made her feel alive again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft scrape of chopsticks against the containers, the occasional sip of wine, and the distant hum of the city beyond the window. Emma felt a tension building in the room, invisible but undeniable, a thread pulling them closer with every heartbeat. Then Chris leaned back slightly, his gaze fixed on hers. "Emma, can I tell you something?" She felt her stomach twist nervously. "What is it?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't want to make things complicated. I don't want to betray anyone. But I can't help noticing you like this. Sitting here, feeling unseen. And I want to be someone who sees you. Really sees you." Emma's breath caught. Her heart raced, pounding so hard it felt as if it would escape her chest. She wanted to look away, to tell him that it wasn't right, that Daniel was her husband, and that loyalty should come first. But part of her apart she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, longed for the warmth and attention in his eyes. "You shouldn't say that," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "I know," Chris said softly, leaning closer, though still keeping a respectful distance. "But sometimes the truth doesn't care about what's right or wrong. Sometimes it just is." Emma's mind spun. His words were dangerous, thrilling, and terrifying all at once. She felt herself being pulled toward him, drawn by something she had buried beneath the monotony of her life. And then, just as the tension reached a peak, her phone buzzed again. It was Daniel. "Miss you. Hope you're okay. Don't wait up." The message made her hands shake. Daniel's distant, casual words contrasted sharply with the intensity of the moment across from her. Her heart felt split, torn between the loyalty she owed to her husband and the magnetic pull of someone who seemed to truly see her again. Chris noticed her hesitation, his gaze softening. "I should go," he said quietly, almost reluctantly. "I didn't mean to make things complicated." Emma felt a pang of disappointment and relief all at once. "No, it's not that. I don't know what to do." He nodded, his eyes holding hers for one long, heavy moment. "I'll leave you to think. But know this, Emma. I'm always here, and I notice you. Always." With that, he stood and collected the takeout containers. Emma watched him leave, her chest aching with emotions she hadn't felt in years. Desire, longing, confusion, and a flicker of hope she didn't want to name. The door closed behind him and the house fell silent again. But this time, the quiet was different. It was charged, heavy, electric. Emma sank onto the couch, her mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. For the first time in a long time, she realized that life could change in a single evening. That moments of unexpected attention, of quiet understanding, could awaken parts of her she had forgotten existed. And she knew, deep down, that tonight was just the beginning. The house was too quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet that felt peaceful, like the calm after a long day, but the kind that pressed into Emma's chest until she could feel the weight of it in every corner of her being. Daniel had left that afternoon for a 3-day business trip to Seattle. He had kissed her on the cheek, not the lips, muttered something about sending her a text when he landed, and hurried out the door with his suitcase dragging behind him. That was Daniel these days, always rushing, always distracted, always somewhere else. Even when he was standing right in front of her, Emma had stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching his car disappear down the street. She hadn't expected to feel so hollow the moment he was gone. But the truth was, she did. The evening dragged on in silence. The ticking of the wall clock echoed louder than usual. The refrigerator hummed and groaned as if it too were restless. She turned on the TV just for background noise, but the canned laughter from the sitcoms felt like an insult to her mood, so she switched it off again. Emma poured herself a glass of red wine, the deep ruby liquid swirling in the glass as though it carried all the emotions she couldn't speak aloud. She leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the small family photographs pinned to the fridge. Smiling faces from summers long gone. Her and Daniel on the beach in California, both turned and carefree. Another photo of them from the early days of their marriage, arms wrapped around each other, foreheads touching, as if the whole world had disappeared around them. Emma pressed her lips together tightly. Those were the days she missed the most, when Daniel would look at her like she was the only person alive. Somewhere along the way, that look had faded. Work had claimed most of him, and the rest of him seemed to be caught up in responsibilities and distractions that had nothing to do with her. The loneliness felt louder with every passing hour. She tried reading, but the words blurred together. She tried music, but every song seemed to tug at memories she wasn't ready to revisit. Finally, she just sat on the couch, staring at the darkened television screen, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. That was when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Emma picked it up, expecting Daniel. Maybe a quick landed safely. Talk. Later. But instead, the name that flashed across the screen made her heart give a startled skip. Chris, her husband's best friend. The message was short, almost casual. Hey Emma, heard Daniel's out of town. Just checking in. Do you need anything? I can swing by if you'd like. Emma stared at the words, her thumb hovering over the screen. Chris. Daniel and Chris had been friends since college. They were as close as brothers, bonded by years of memories. Late-night study sessions, wild parties, and then later, steady careers and marriages. Chris was around often enough that he felt almost like family. He came over for barbecues, for football games, for the occasional Thanksgiving dinner when travel wasn't in the cards. He was always polite, always helpful, always smiling. But in recent months, Emma had noticed something. She couldn't put her finger on it exactly. A longer pause when he looked at her. A softness in his smile that wasn't there before. A question in his eyes that never fully formed into words. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe it was just her own loneliness projecting itself onto him. But deep down, she knew. There was something unspoken between them. Something she didn't dare name. And now, here he was, reaching out. Her heart pounded. As she typed a reply, deleted it, and typed again. What could she say? If she said yes, was she inviting trouble? If she said no, was she turning away the only bit of warmth she had felt in weeks? Finally, she typed, Sure, come over. I could use the company. She stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. Once it was gone, a strange mix of relief and dread washed over her. The minutes ticked by slowly after that. Emma found herself cleaning the living room, straightening pillows, adjusting the blanket draped over the couch. She checked her hair. In the mirror, touched up her lipstick, then immediately scolded herself for caring. It's just Chris, she thought. Daniel's best friend. Nothing more. He's just being kind. But another voice inside her whispered, Then why does it feel different? Why are you nervous like this? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted her heart into her throat. She peered through the window and saw Chris stepping out of his truck, carrying 2 paper bags. Takeout. Of course. That was him, thoughtful, easygoing, the kind of man who noticed when someone else might be too tired or too lonely to cook. Emma opened the door before he could knock. Double quotes. Hey, he said, his smile warm in the glow of the porch light. I figured you probably didn't want to eat alone, so. Chinese okay? Emma exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Chinese is perfect. Come in. And just like that, the quiet house no longer felt so empty. But as Chris stepped inside, placing the bags on the counter, Emma couldn't shake the feeling rising in her chest. This was harmless. This was innocent. Yet something told her something deep and undeniable, that by letting him in tonight, she was opening more than just her front door. She was opening the door to a story that would change her life forever.